We're at a new level and it's changing things. I talked a little bit about this last week, but now you've got your foundations. You know how to interpret a chart. You know the basics of what each sign, house, planets, aspects mean. You put them together to see how they work in your chart. You looked at the timings and the transits, and you know how to put a transit. So we've done interpretations looking at people's charts, setting up the 8-year graph and the 30-year Saturn graph, or the lifetime Saturn graph. And we can get the time perspective. These are all matter-of-fact, practical things. We calculate, we do, and we see them, and then we observe what's happening. And we really see the texture of how astrology is working in life and in our behavior and our character. But we still are missing a piece. I mean, most astrologers, probably 60–65% of astrologers, use the natal chart and transits and may add some other techniques. But we're heading to progressions, which is much more spiritual, mystical side of understanding things, and it takes a different view, a different perspective. You can't interpret them the same way you interpret transits. Same energy, but it works on different layers at different speeds at different times. So to get to there, because transits, progressions tend to work much slower, take longer time, have longer statements, almost seemingly more faded statements. You have to know how to deal with smaller and smaller sections of the zodiac of the planets. You need to know more detailed divisions. You need to understand stars. You need to understand a lot of things. So right now, up till now, I've been structuring, helping you build the boat to navigate the ocean, helping you structure your consciousness to see how astrology works. And you know that. Now I have to, when you first started it, it was like you were lost in the ocean and we had to build this boat to get a structure to go through it, to navigate through it. Now that you got the structure, I have to expand it so it becomes phenomenally larger, so it becomes, wow, how can I ever hold this all together? Wow, there's so many more concepts, so much. So this is a more mind expanding course. We're expanding much more factors and seeing more things, and you're beginning to run into many more options of how astrology works, or how its potentials, and look at it much more, I don't know if you, macroscopically, microscopically. We're looking in a much more intimate manner. So to do this, we have to go into various concepts. And today, the topic of today's class is called 3 Zodiacs. So we've studied the tropical zodiac. We've studied the tropical zodiac, which is the seasons of the year. Each sign is related to the seasons of the year. Really, each degree is a different ratio of the day and night, of the amount of daylight and nighttime across the year. That ratio of daylight to nighttime across the year in each degree is the uniqueness of each degree in the zodiac. So this zodiac, the tropical zodiac, is used in the West and in Europe. It's used all over the place, but there are other zodiacs. So, but the distinctive factor of the tropical zodiac is based on the seasons. And Aries in the springtime, the passions of springtime, you know, and just Scorpios in the fall, when if you haven't got enough crops or your crops aren't good enough, you're going to have to kill one of your animals in the farm to be able to get through the winter. It's just that, or you might do that anyways to get through the winter. But just there's relationships with each sign, and we see it by the increasing light and the darkness. And we've had this story, we built it up in very good detail, and in a way that we could relate to it. As we say, it's not just a theory. When we get to this, so Western astrology tends to use the tropical zodiac, the Western zodiac, based on the seasons. The puzzle that comes up with the tropical zodiac is that the seasons are reversed in the southern hemisphere. And because the seasons are reversed in the southern hemisphere, so the zodiac has to be reversed in the southern hemisphere. The passions and the impulse of springtime is Aries. It's the mating season. It's the beginning of things. So all astrologers don't practice it that way. In the tropical zodiac, most books are written in the north, and people in the southern hemisphere tend to use the northern hemisphere books and just accept it as a symbol. But astrology is more than a symbol. It's the archetype. It's the DNA of life. It's how we're connected to the very fabric and texture of nature. So this is our approach. Now, the second zodiac is the sidereal zodiac. and it's based on the stars in the sky. It's based loosely based on the constellations of the sky. It's used in a lot of places near the equator. India uses the sidereal zodiac. They don't have the 4 seasons. They have wet and dry seasons, and they tend to look, and the constellations go right overhead, so they really see the planets moving through the constellations. And they tend to use the constellations, and they developed the study working in the constellations. Some of the difficulty, so the difficulty is that 2,000 years ago, these two systems, the constellations, are given the same names as the signs of the zodiac, but they represent two different things. One's the seasons and divisions of the seasons. The other is the star names and the star groupings. And 2,000 years ago, they were aligned. So the Aries sign of the zodiac and the Aries constellation were, and the sidereal zodiac were all lined up, so they were equal. And many of the books written back then, and many of the traditions that we're still dealing with today, have interwoven the two as if they're the same. Now they're separating, and it's a much more distinctive thing. We'll go over this, but just what happened is many of the sidereal interpretations were based on constellations, became interpreted by seasonal or tropical factors, and some of the tropical factors became influenced by, in their interpretation, by the constellations and the sidereal factors. So, like you have Taurus the bull, or Aries the ram. These are the constellations, but we often refer to them within the signs of the zodiac. So there's an overlap here in our understanding of them, how they run together. When we're working with a chart, we have to see them really clearly for how they are. So you're going to have Vedic astrology and Indian astrology. There's a lot of branches of people that just use the Vedic astrology, and they say, "Oh, you're not really the Aries. You're going to be the Pisces, or you're not." Like, it's going to change these things and say you're not one and the other. And it's not a correct interpretation. It's not one or the other. You're both. But they're two different frequencies of interpretation. And this is what's confused. So they're kept as separate systems, and one or the other, and there's so many fights around it. But regardless of the different zodiacs, all the planets are in the same houses, and the same aspects are going on in any chart. It's not the planets in the signs, the planets in the houses, the planetary aspects, they're the same in all the systems. So they can be, there's different house systems, that's a different story. But with the zodiac systems, these are basic systems. So one's based on the sun's rays and the light and the darkness hitting the earth and the seasons. That's the tropical zodiac. The other is based on the constellations and the space that things are. So many of the timings and technique differences, when you get into transits and timings, they're slightly different in the two systems, because in the tropical zodiac, you're looking at the repeated phase of the year, the season of the year, and you're looking at the time factors and the cycles. In the constellation, you're looking at the space of the constellation and the space where things are. And you're looking at the space when something is back to the same place or the same space, not always the same. It's not slightly different differentiations, and slightly different interpretations have developed from this. But there's a lot of good material in sidereal astrology. There's many different techniques, and there's a lot of literature where one side is influencing the other side and going back and forth. And I felt that it's both the same. So this is one of the first drawings I do. I drew it, the first charts I do to try and understand this. And on the inner wheel, you have the regular tropical zodiac. However, you'll see something I was doing a long time ago. I had changed the signs to distinguish between the tropical and the sidereal. So in this case, all the tropical signs have a kind of wave factor. They look similar, but they have a wave factor. We'll come to this, but it's not so important to concentrate on different symbols for the tropical sign. It was just something I did in my work to discriminate between the two. You can just as easily do it with using the tropical signs, and when it's sidereal, you just put sidereal or side beside it, and you would have the same thing. So, but wherever the sign is, you see the name of the sign is above it. So in that inner wheel, the main wheel, is the tropical zodiac with the Earth in the center. Outside of this, you're going to see 12 divisions. Pisces, Aquarius, you see the 12 signs, the 12 sidereal signs of the zodiac. Now the sidereal signs, see if we get this a bit bigger. Yeah, hang on, I'll get this a bit bigger.